I'm Vanessa Louise. Welcome to Choose You, Choose Bliss, where we believe in one goal, one purpose, love. Through shared experiences, we aim to enlighten, enrich, and enroll you in actively applying the tools and techniques to enable and continue healing for your whole self. Now is the time to take back our power, reconnect with our true selves, each other, including the world around us, and live life with confidence, purpose, and joy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing you. As ever, it's an absolute blessing to be sharing space with you all. And today we're talking about developing a resilience mindset and managing emotions from extreme life experiences. My guest today sounds like he's been to hell and back in ways many of us will never be able to comprehend, but will wholeheartedly be grateful for. So let's delve straight in and get naked with James. Thank you, James, for being here and sharing your unique story with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm absolutely, I'm in awe of the conversations that we have had prior to being here today. And I have one question for you, because I think it would be a great segue to the rest of the conversation that we're going to have. And that is, what has been your greatest life's learning, or the statement that defines what your life has taught you?
Yeah, that's a great one. There's a few, but I think we'll go with this one. You're either winning or you're learning.
Ooh.
And it took me a long time to get to that point, because it was always winning or losing. And then I realised that I don't think you're losing if you learn from your mistakes or your decisions.
That's wonderful. And that in itself just helps you remain in a mindset that is always looking of opportunities to grow and evolve, regardless
100%.
of the situation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, like anything, you say these, they sound very simple when you say it like that. It's just like, well, just reframe. Every time you lose, just reframe it, and look for the learning points and try and grow from it. But the other part of it is that's your logic speaking. It's the cognitive part of your brain. There's also that emotional voice calling you a dickhead.
Yeah.
Giving you grief for making that mistake. And you need to, you can't ignore those voices though. You can't cut them out.
No.
So it's trying to have healthy relationships with both of them. So you're logical, but at the same time you're not emotionless. You are passionate. And we have a strange relationship sometimes, or I certainly do anyway. I wouldn't speak for other people, but it took me a long time to kind of figure out that you have to have a healthy relationships with things like sadness and anger and frustration, because they are part of the human condition. So you have to allow yourself, I think, or I certainly have had to allow myself to feel them and learn how to manage those emotions and live with them and not against them.
Well, and I think, because is it fair to say that we're not encouraged or taught how to have a healthy relationship with ourselves, our inner selves, particularly our emotions? And as children, we're kind of led to believe that unlovely emotions, as I call them, or negative, bad, labelled bad emotions, are emotions to avoid rather than embracing them. And they're not bad, are they? They just make you feel bad. And that's the part that we don't like feeling.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, that was certainly my experience. And it's no one's fault, by the way. You could start blaming the school system or your parents and your friends and all that side of things. But I just think it is... Society's changed, and certainly my experience was I was born in 85. I'm 40 this year. I know I look 25. You don't laugh too hard at that. But certainly going through the 90s as a young boy, and then into the teenage years in the late 90s. No, I agree with that. It was very that British keep calm and carry on. There wasn't a lot of talk about what to do, how to manage these emotions. I mean, that manifested, unfortunately for me, at the time. No one knew what was going on. My teachers couldn't explain it. My parents couldn't explain it. But it's probably started when I was about 9, maybe earlier than that, actually, 7 or 8. I started picking out my eyelashes.
Okay.
So I would have literally bold patches across my eyelids. And it got picked up eventually. My parents and teachers noticed it, and questions were asked, like, why are you picking out your eyelashes? And I couldn't answer the question. And they were like, well, stop doing it. You look like an idiot. People are going to think you're crazy and all that stuff. Because I didn't know what it was. And I learned all those years later that it was probably a marker or a sign that if unchecked and unnoticed, I would probably struggle with worry and anxiety later on in life, which unfortunately did come to fruition, but I'm sure we're going to get to that at some point. So certainly just from that angle, that was my experience of it. It was, I don't think it's anyone's fault. I just think it wasn't common knowledge to know what to do in those situations.
Well, I totally agree with you. And it's absolutely no way in a blaming or pointing the finger at anyone. It just is a fact that as human beings, we're not taught how to trust ourselves, how to listen to ourselves. I speak about this so much because I think because we're not taught how to go inwards and reflect and build that, as you called it, that healthy relationship with the inner dialogue, the inner feeling, our inner system. We think of it as being something completely separate, and that we're just a human being, this meat suit walking around. And so, but because nobody knows it and teaches us how to do that, we kind of bumble along, and therefore we don't get the support that we need to be able to encourage us to learn more about who we truly are. And therefore, a simple thing of picking out your eyelashes, and I know there's a very long name for it. It's actually a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called trichotillomania, it's called.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
I knew it had a long name, but something seemingly quite simple was actually coming from a place within you that you were unaware of. And because the people around you didn't see it that way, it's stop doing that, don't do it, you're silly, etc., etc. So we learn not to do things and express ourselves in certain ways. And of course, then that ends up being a whole host of, later on in life, a bigger problem. So talk to me then about your years or your decade or so after that, going through school and going through adolescence, and what was showing up for you? How was showing up in life?
Yeah, it was challenging. I didn't have I wouldn't say it was a difficult childhood in my mind looking back. I think certainly looking back, the good outweighs the bad. But I was brought up in an armed forces family, so we moved around a lot.
Right.
So I found out the other day that I'd lived somewhere that I didn't even know I lived. We moved around that lot. I was talking to my mum on the phone. She goes, "Yeah, we lived in Cornwall." And I went, "No, we fucking didn't." And she went, "We did. You just don't remember." And so before I was 10, I'd lived in several different places in England, Scotland, Germany, later on Australia as well. But that was the challenging part. For me, it was always having to learn to start again. And we always seem to move about at difficult or challenging periods. So when I was just coming into my teenage years or going into year 10, which is your GCSEs, or starting to pick up on that, and I was just riddled with worry. I didn't know. Anxiety wasn't a word at the time. Like when I was a teenager, we talked a lot about, I'm depressed, but that was just a teenage thing to say. We didn't really understand it, and no one talked about anxious or being anxiety, but I am naturally quite neurotic. I worry a lot. I'm quite an emotional person in general, but the teenage years amplified that, and I didn't have any tools. I didn't have anything to rely on to kind of manage that in a healthy way. Like, it wasn't even coping mechanisms at that point. I just didn't know how to deal with it. And then I found weed.
Right.
Then I found weed, and I started smoking when I was 14. And that really did not stop for long periods of time until I joined the armed forces when I was 22.
Okay.
And I smoked a lot. Started off as habitual, and then it just took off, really. And I've always been quite a big lad. I'm quite hairy. Not my head at the moment, but my beard certainly. I've always been able to grow a beard since I was quite young as well. So then couple that with pub culture was still a thing when I was in my teenage years. So used to drink and party a lot, play about with other drugs. But at the time it was great. I was a teenager. I was really into my music, particularly like rock and metal. So I was going to the gig. I lived just north of London. We were going to gigs all the time and getting part in that culture and playing bands. I didn't see it as a problem. It crept up. It crept up.
Normally, isn't it?
Yeah, it crept up, and it didn't really show its ugly head until things started going wrong in other areas of my life. Okay. And that's when we started having issues. So it's a mixed bag, like a lot of teenage years were, but didn't help myself.
That's the experience in itself anyway. And as a parent, and you're a parent, right?
I am, yeah.
So, as a parent, and I know my kids are now a lot older than yours, adult, but I remember thinking, and I wasn't too wayward, right? I was almost the complete opposite to you. I was a bit prudy and a bit quiet, and it wasn't until I was 40 that I started to practice what you were just talking about. But I think as a mother, I've only ever wanted my children to live the life and make their choices, because I know that we learn from those experiences. We painful or lovely. We learn from every choice that we make. And a consequence, good or bad, lovely or unlovely, is always going to be the end result of every choice that we make. If we take choices away from people and do too much or protect them or hide them away from things, then they don't learn how to make choices. They don't learn to think for themselves. They don't learn that they're capable. They don't learn from the experience or the consequences of all the choices that they make. So whenever we go through that period in our life, if you do, I would always encourage people to make the choices, fall over, just be there with them when they wobble or fall over, without trying to take the element of choice away from them. But so I would much rather have people around me who have had checkered experiences, who have had ups and downs and ins and outs, and are willing to be open and expressive. That for me I'd much rather have those people in my corner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very fascinating insight, and I massively agree. I have two children. My eldest is a girl, and she's going to secondary school.
Wow.
There are things, stereotypes, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at that, do come from fact sometimes. I do, not just because they're different personalities, but there is a thing there about a father and daughter relationship. I'm very protective of her naturally. It's instinct. It's not even logical. If someone even looks at her in a way that I don't like, I want to hold that child upside down in a puddle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I say I'm not raising glass.
No.
Because exactly what you were saying, if I jump in every time and defend her, she will crack and then break. She has to, as you said, she has to be exposed to hardships to grow. So I just don't disagree.
Absolutely. And only through that period of time from 14 to 22, where sounds like you just said yes to things, and you just you made choices, either lovely or unlovely. You lived life.
And it wasn't till later on there were choices that I was making, because if I was fucked up because I wasn't concerned, I know now that if you're preconditioned to it genetically, and then life experiences, nature, nurture, all of that stuff, it's going to exacerbate things like paranoia and worry potentially. It certainly did for me. I didn't think about that at the time. I was like, I'm smoking this stuff, I'm drinking this stuff. All the worries I have day to day, all the anxiety, meeting new people, they're not. If I'm intoxicated, they're not an issue anymore. So it was great. It turned into just self-medication.
Well, that's exactly what it does do, isn't it? The things we reach for outside of us numb what it is that we don't want to look at inside of us, but we don't know that that's what's happening, and we keep doing it because we feel better. But then when that thing isn't there and those emotions arise, then that's when we're stuffed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly that.
So that's taken you up to 22. And then you went into the armed forces.
Yeah, so what happened about a year before I started training properly to start my armed forces career, I got thrown out. I was living with my girlfriend at the time. My parents at this point had emigrated to Australia, so they were, as you can tell, very, very limited in what they could do. But I'd just gone off the fucking rails at that point. Wow. The only thing she contacted them and they said, look, he has a biological father he doesn't know very well. He is in the country, and we'd had a bit of a relationship a couple of years prior to that. We'd started seeing each other again, not very frequently. He'd remarried and he had stepbrothers. I had stepbrothers and stuff. I'd struck up a relationship with them, and they said, look, he might be able to help. And I don't remember the exact journey, but I'd been up for about 24 hours at the time. It was after a big house party, and she was like, I can't deal with this anymore. I was abusive, verbally, never physically, but I was very verbally abusive and controlling, and literally all the worst things that you can imagine an addict, because I was an addict, could be. And so he came and picked me up, and then it was literally, I was up there I was doing a plumbing apprenticeship at the time. So I was up there, just timing wise, it just happened to be, it was coincidence over the summer break between year 1 and 2 of this apprenticeship. So that's about 7 weeks. And I got up there and I slept it all off. And he said the next day, he's like, that's it. We haven't had a relationship, but you fucked it, mate. You're done. So this is how you're not able, or you're not capable of making decisions at this point. I'm 21 at the time. I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't even know you. Now you're pretending to be dad, and you're going to start telling me that I don't know these things, or I don't know how to take care of myself. And he's like, you don't. So this is it. You get up every morning, we go to the gym, no alcohol, no nicotine, no nothing. And went cold turkey, and I was very unfit, very overweight, really just unhealthy in general. And so it was a big shock to the system. But when I got back to finish off my plumbing apprenticeship, just something had changed. Just that routine of getting up every day and working out and all that stuff. And I'd figured out that I'd actually had some natural ability for running, which I wasn't aware of. So I got back, I finished off that apprenticeship and I kept up my training. I then moved out. I went back to the girlfriend's, moved out because it just wasn't going to work. And I moved in with a friend of mine and his family. They took me in, which was very kind of them. Finished off that plumbing apprenticeship. But during that time, someone we knew in our circle was joining the Royal Marines. And he'd already been selected to go on it's 32 weeks training at the time. I think it's 36 now. They've increased the length of it. And we were joking about, and he said, I heard you're good at running. Do you want to come out training with me? I said, yeah, let's do it. So we did a 3-mile run, and I smashed him. I beat him by about a minute and a half. And he said, have you ever thought about anything like that? And I said, no, well, I grew up in that forces family. It's not really, I went off on a completely different trajectory. And he said, you could, if it's something you're interested in, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it. And we did. And I was like, you know what? I'm not really happy with the plumbing thing. I kind of looked back on what I'd achieved and I wasn't happy. I was like, literally the read my school reports and everything else I did, in my own head, and what was said about me has the potential, can't be asked. Has the potential, just can't be asked to apply himself. And that's what I heard in my head. You have potential, you can't be asked. So let's see if we can change that. And I did, and I started training for it. So I was getting up at really early, going running, working on site all day, then coming back and doing gym work, calisthenics to get ready for it. And I got accepted at CTCRM, the Commando Training Centre, for a start date in September 2008. So I just turned 23 when that happened. But I'd only been training for it for 6 months, and I fucking paid for that, I tell you. Like, it was another level, and I'd wish, in hindsight, I'd done more work in preparation. But I didn't take stock of it till later on, going, you've got to this point. All the people around, the people I was with were like super athletes. These are like super people, semi-professional athletes that had, for whatever reason, had course corrected, or they'd just been high-level athletes their whole life, and I was in and amongst them. But I'd got there, and then that was the beginning of that. Wow. Which was intense. So I started off with 57 other guys in the troop I was with, and I got to commando tests, which is right at the end. It's the last hurdle, and I was one of 14 originals. Of 14. The rest of them had either been backtrooped through injury, or they'd left, or they'd been medically discharged, because still a very high attrition rate to earn your Green Beret. A lot of people just don't make it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've got this kind of image of this diamond, this piece of coal being under pressure, and it just that people falling out, the more pressure that there is, and then you're left with the elite few. Well, you wouldn't want anybody else fighting for you, would you, apart from the elite few? So you're down to a troop of 14 people.
Yeah, and then at that point, I fell. So I took the commando tests the first time round, and I won't go in. We don't have time to go into all of them. Maybe that'll be a different time. I'd love to come back and speak to you. But one of them, the last one, is called the 30 miler. So it's 30 miles across Dartmoor with at least 40 pounds of gear. Just depends who you're going through with. They may increase that because it's just make it a bit more difficult. And I collapsed on it, and I couldn't understand what had happened, like why that had happened. Because I look back, and running or moving across distances, carrying weight was not an issue. My issue was rope climbing and stuff like that. That's why I wish I'd done that extra training, because I didn't have the upper body strength that I wanted. That let me down, but I still made it through. And so I got back trooped. So 2 weeks later, I do the tests again. And I get to the third checkpoint this time on the 30 miler, and I collapse again. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I literally just drained. Like, I couldn't explain. I just felt exhausted for no reason. And I got a rerun then the next day. And I started off, I think I got 20 miles in. And again, I was like, I can't stop this time. And I just kept going. And I woke up in sick bay on camp. And I was like, what's going on? You collapsed. And so, unfortunately, a gentleman who's not with us anymore, he was killed on operations in Afghanistan. He'd fireman carried me, so over the shoulders, to a Hilux, I think it was, and then sped me back to camp. But my pulse was dropping. It was really faint. My breathing was really laboured, and they got me back to sick bay, and they're like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, where is it?" And they couldn't get my boot off. And what had happened is I had sepsis, which was just building up in my system because of an infection in my foot that I didn't even just register to it.
Wow.
And that's how resilient they make you. Like, I was very, very sick. I should have been in a hospital bed, and I'd gone through 2 sets of commando tests.
Yeah. And
been able to stand on my feet. Even I knew something was wrong. I knew I was unwell, but I was like, I'm not stopping. I have to keep going. So this little boy who couldn't manage worry because he was ripping his eyelashes out, who had to use all those drugs because he couldn't be in groups of people without being intoxicated, who couldn't even ring a fucking stranger up on the phone because he was terrified of it. had gone through all of that and then ended up like that. And it just shows you, or I think it demonstrates, this isn't about me, this is about other people. Don't write yourself off.
Yeah.
Don't write yourself off. Even if you think you are very average, if you have the mindset for it, if you can develop that headspace of it's not fucking losing, it's learning. I need to learn from this and grow, and accept that discomfort is essential to growing. You can make it. Hard work does at times, and can do a lot of the times, also beat talent. I've met a lot of talented people in my life, and they do not have discipline, they do not have work ethic, and as soon as you put them in difficult situations and they can't get through it through their natural talent, they break.
I totally agree with you. But also what I'm hearing here is there's almost like this something inside of you that encouraged you to keep going, because mindset alone doesn't do it. That energy alone can't do it without you deciding to go with it. So it's almost like the connection, it kind of like the galvanized the two together. That sounds like it got you as far as you did, but it does sound like there was a limit that you hit that you kept reaching. And did you get past that? What was the next stage past that?
I think it was just a relentless fire in myself not to let... I'd quit everything. I tried everything and quit everything. I was like, I can't do this again. I can't go back with my head held high. Like, you're going to have to carry me out dead on a stretcher if I'm going to fail this.
Yeah.
But I think in that point, a big part where they talk about, Royal Marines, it's a state of mind. We do, as I think for me, you concentrate on that mindset, that courage, determination, unselfishness, cheerfulness in the face of adversity. They're great qualities, but what you are also learning at the same time, which they don't really talk about or teach, is your ability to manage your emotions. Because you are in situations where you're not even just overtired, you are sleep deprived. It's unhealthy. Yeah. That you are deliberately put in situations that are designed to make you worry and make you perform. So you just naturally, it's kind of like a sink or swim moment. It's part of it. It's like, because they don't teach you how to emotionally regulate, or they don't teach you any emotional regulation skills at all. It's kind of like something you figure out or you don't.
I was just about to say, is this something you taught yourself through experiencing? Because you said you were quite an emotional, at the beginning of the pod, you said you were quite emotional. And I see that as a really beautiful, sensitive thing that makes human beings so glorious. But being emotionally resilient and learning to manage that is something you taught yourself?
I think so. I did. I did in some way. It did, I mean, eventually it fell apart, which I'm sure we're going to get to in a minute. But I had to find ways of dealing with a lot of it was overwhelming worry or overwhelming just lowness in general and loneliness. So I don't know how, I couldn't say I consciously could put my finger on how I did it and tricks and tips to do it. I just think over time I managed to overcome things, or certainly more often than not I managed to get through stuff, but eventually it ran out. I think I was putting a lot of energy into dismissing these emotions and essentially shoving them down deep, just going, no, don't feel that, just get it out your head, So I went from using drugs and alcohol and other things to cope. Then I used the Marines to cope. Like, you're a fucking Royal Marines commando now, son. You need to, worry about that. Don't worry about that. That doesn't bother you anymore. But then when I left, I didn't have anything, and everything. I couldn't rely on what I'd learned, or it wasn't even learning. I couldn't. It just didn't work anymore. Whatever I was doing, it just wasn't working.
It sounds
anymore.
Like the focus of being a commando just took. It needed everything you had to focus on the situations that you were in.
Do you want me to be completely honest?
I'd love you to be completely honest.
I've talked about this at length with people, etc. And there's this, because of stereotypes and media and all that side, and films and TV shows. It's like, well, you because of what happened later on. It's like, well, that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been in the Royal Marines. It was Afghanistan that did that. And I said, this is what I feel. I think that if I hadn't have joined the Royal Marines, I'd be fucking dead.
Okay.
I would have killed myself. I tried to in my late teens. I wouldn't have had a reason to stop using drugs and alcohol. I would have probably there'd be a few things that could have happened. I would have killed myself. I would have got into a situation where I was killed, whether that be drink driving or got into a fight or something like that. Or if I was alive, I wouldn't be a healthy member of society. I think that being in the Royal Marines actually channeled a lot of those things that I was feeling in a positive way. Yeah.
Just, again, refined you in the fire of what it was that you were living through in all your training. It kind of just refined you into the human being that you were born to be. Sounded like it did save your life.
Oh, it did, 100%. And I'll always be... Look, we said at the beginning, I said, it's winning and learning. I also have picked up on there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And what I mean by that, everything we do comes with a compromise. Same thing with being the Royal Marines, or being in the Royal Marines and everything that comes with it. There's some great things about it, and there were some awful things about it. But the trade-offs, the good trade-offs, outweigh the bad.
Well, and then that's the blend, and that's the balance of life, right? That's the polarities of life. But also, I'm curious as well, from your own learnings, yes, from your own experience of being in the Marines. But what about watching how other people did or didn't handle being in the Marines? There must have been learnings in that as well, because I know that there are certain situations that I've looked at my life and gone, how would I have behaved, or what choice would I have made, or on reflection, the choice and the decision that they made. And I kind of go around the houses with it. And so I learn from how other people behave and the choices they make as well. Did that factor at all? Because that must have, with different personalities and going from 57 to 14, there must have been great learnings in what was it about those 14 that was still there?
It's a mix of things, really. Some of it is just luck. Some of it is just they've got through unscathed. Some of it is because people were unlucky. They were injured or they got sick or something happened. Some of it was just because it wasn't for them.
Okay.
It wasn't for them. But it's not... I can't remember verbatim about the 14 of us that were left. I mean, there were 14 of us left, but you get the members of the troop you are filled up by back troopers. So even though there were 14 originals, there were still like 30 of us, I think, that had got through to those tests. But those guys had been back trooped, or they'd been injured and they'd been rehabbed and come back in. So it's still a big mix of people. I mean, I learned more positively from the people that didn't go through things first time. And what I mean by that is, I remember actually, I do remember having a discussion. I remember this was a few years later when I was at a commando unit, and this was, I was on pre-deployment training for Herrick over in Afghanistan. And I was just talking to a lad, and he was saying, "What I think that if you don't pass everything first time in training, that's it. You should be kicked out." So there's a few points during those 32 weeks that are quite crucial. One of them's called bottom field, where you've got 21 pounds and a rifle on your back, and you have to do an obstacle course and climb a 30-foot rope and some other bits and pieces, and you can fail it. And he's like, if people fail that, you should be shit canned. If you fail the commando test once, you should be shit canned. And I could see his point of view. It's like, okay, it demands high performance and only the best. But I would say that there are a lot of people that, well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, I don't know, but there's certainly some people that go through that training that are just very, very fit and strong. So they actually go through the physical side of it. It's quite straightforward.
But if they're not interested,
yeah,
they're on another level.
That's it. Physical. And that was my answer to him. It was like, I want a team full of people that I know when they get knocked over, they get back up and they just keep coming and keep coming. Absolutely. And that's what I certainly learned moving forward. And I've tried to approach life in general with that headspace is get up and go again. It's not losing. You only lose if you don't get up or you don't learn from it.
Yeah, I totally agree. But that's an attitude that needs to be grown and nurtured for sure. So what happened then? If you had your pre-Marines life that was distracting you, then you had your Marine life that your focus had to be there, and then you come home, and then what happened then?
Yeah, it really went to shit. It went to shit. I met somebody in 2012, and we got pregnant very quick.
Okay.
It was a complete surprise. But I'd already put my notice in. I just had enough at that point. It was the beginning of it was the beginning of the end of what led to essentially a huge issue. So, as I said, all the things that I'd learned through experience and all the things that I'd developed as coping mechanisms just weren't working anymore. I just wasn't happy in there. It wasn't enough. I was like, well, at least I'm a Royal Marine. It didn't work anymore. No. I was just very, very unsatisfied. So I'd put my notice in. But about halfway through that, I was actually going home to tell, she's now my wife, but at the time I was going home to tell her, look, I can't leave this. And I knew what that meant. I knew that meant she was going to leave me. And she said, well, I've got some big... I didn't even get to have that conversation, because she said, can we go out for dinner? I've got some big news. And I was like, brilliant. You're going to break up with me and I'm going to get off the hook for a difficult conversation here. So... but that never happened. I said, well, do you want to go first? And she said, yeah. And she goes, I'm pregnant. And I went, oh, fuck. In my mind. But something switched over in my head. I was like, well, I can't stay in. Like, I grew up in that environment, like moving around as a child. I knew enough that I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not angry at my parents or any of that stuff. I just learned from it that that's not going to be how my children live. If it's going to work, we're going to stay in one place. It's going to be stable. They're going to go to good schools. I'm going to give them the best chance they get. It doesn't mean I'm going to like literally protect them from hardships. They're going to get it, and they certainly do get it. I'll tell you that. But it's going to be different. So the first thing where it went wrong is I retrained into something that I was not passionate about for a job that essentially was going to turn into a potential good career that paid well, but I just wasn't interested. So I retrained into construction, health and safety, and I did that initially, and I just fucking hated it. I just did not enjoy it at all. I just didn't enjoy the day-to-day of it. I wasn't passionate about it. So I was trying to find other ways like outside of work to manage that. But over the next couple of years, things just got bad. I started leaning into old habits again. I started drinking a lot at first. And then I had a really nasty incident, a workplace incident, where I'd kind of gone from, even though I wasn't happy with work, it was like, nah, you're doing really well, and I was moving upwards, etc. I had a big event which started off a spiral, which started with just paranoia about people around me, and it was because of a trust thing. Basically, what had happened is somebody had essentially decided they wanted me out of the business, and then they decided that that's it, we're going to go after this person by any means necessary, and all the gloves are off. And it was because of that, even though nothing came of it, I just became very suspicious and paranoid, and all the worry that I'd managed to cope with, it just kind of just started to overspill. And then things started really going wrong, where I was starting to hear voices and hear things and see things that just weren't there. I became very concerned with security, particularly around the house and things of that nature. I thought people were following me and were out to harm me, essentially. So at that stage, I did speak to my wife, because I was becoming less and less present. So I did speak to my wife, and she said, well, we need to get you help. So I got in contact with a GP, and then several weeks later, I was in front of counsellors, but things were just progressively getting worse. And they're like, well, we're not sure what's really going on. We're going to look at this, we're going to look at that. And then whilst I was waiting to see a psychiatrist, because that was the next step, I had an incident where I was woken up by my wife, who was pregnant with our second child at the time, and she said, "What have you done? What's going on?" And I didn't know how I was there, why I was there. It was just in the morning, and I had emptied the knife block in the kitchen, and I'd put very sharp, like decent cooking knives by doors and windows in the house, with no recollection of doing it. Nothing at all. So at that stage, I rang up the crisis team, who I'd had contact with, because I already spoke to them. I said, I'm hearing things, I'm seeing things, I don't know what's going on. And they said, psychiatrists can't see you. We're too busy, we're too backlogged. And I said, well, I'm dangerous. Like, I'm playing about with weapons now, and I don't remember doing it. And so they said, you're going to have to wait. And then I had that evening, I was having some sort of night terror. And she was 4 years old at the time. And my daughter came into the room, because she obviously heard me in distress, and she came to check on me, and woke me up in that moment. I didn't realise who she was. I tried to strangle her. Wow. So I didn't see a child. I just saw an intruder in the house. So I went to do it. So my wife, she was about 8 months pregnant at the time, threw herself across me, which managed to stop me from actually getting too close to her. And I hit my head. And after half a minute or so, I'd come round. And at that stage, she did call the crisis team, the mental health team again, explain the situation. I said, if we can't see him now, there's nothing we can do in that way, but we strongly recommend that you call the police, and we can talk about sectioning, or essentially getting him out of the house, because he's dangerous.
Wow.
And that's all. That was the options we were given, and it was kind of like, by this point my mum and dad had moved back to the UK. I think if my family hadn't been around to kind of help us navigate that, we would have had issues. But it all they did say was we can't get you to a psychiatrist now, but what we have to do is, because you said there's been a violent incident with children involved, we're going to have to get social services involved. So I'm no further to getting help, but what is now becoming an issue is social services are now concerned that I am violent, I am dangerous, and I have children in the house with a pregnant girlfriend. So I went off. I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder first. I had social services come round twice, which was obviously very distressing for me and my wife, basically just to see if I was going to do anything violent or put everyone else in danger. And that was obviously extremely stressful for everyone, but ultimately my wife is pregnant at the time, and she's having to deal with that as well as being pregnant. And so they decided that I was safe, but I needed to be on antipsychotic medication or some form of psychiatric medication. So I started off on mood stabilizers and antipsychotics. And I was on them for a few years, but I just didn't get on with the medication. It just made me feel dead. I remember, it's a horrible thing to experience, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I remember holding my son for the first time, and I was just dead inside. I was numb. I didn't feel anything because I was so fucked up on prescribed medication that I was just off, just away. So I was like, I have to find a way to deal with these things. And I did what I did before. I was like, I'm going cold turkey. By the way, I'm not advocating this. Don't ever do it. If you're prescribed something, listen to your doctors, listen to your physicians. I'm not advocating, I'm not telling anyone what to do. But I went, I'm not doing it. I'm coming off this medication. It's not helping me. So I found other ways to do it. I went back into all the things that I knew worked, which was fitness and running and lifting weights again, and all those things that I'd found solace with in the past, and they did work for a long time. And then I started smoking. I don't know why. I went over to the States for a wedding in California, and weed is legal over there. So I was like, well, it's been a long time. I'm sure I can do it now, he says. And started smoking it again. I came back and started smoking weed again, and got myself in the shit. And then because of that and lots of other little things that went on with it, I ended up having the same sort of paranoia, the worry, the security issues again. But because I knew what was coming, I got ahead of it. So this time I was very, very, what's the right word? Very, very accurate is the wrong way to describe it, but in detail, I was observed and treated this time. So over a 6-week period or something of that nature, I was working with psychologists and psychiatrists to find out what was going on. And they said, well, look, this bipolar thing or diagnosis doesn't sit right with us. But unfortunately, we have other things that we're concerned about. So we're diagnosing you with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. And they were for a time exploring my situation as a borderline personality disorder as well.
Wow.
Which they are, after lots more work, they decided, no, you don't meet the criteria of that. I think once I was sober and stopped smoking the weed again, they were like, nah, we think that was more likely the weed talking, but the other stuff still stands. And wow. So a lot of information there, sorry.
Yeah, no, please don't apologise. I'm just fascinated because as I'm listening to you, and of course I can see your face and I can see how you're speaking so candidly. One of the questions I have, though, is healing isn't a linear journey, right? So when you came home and the shit hit the fan, and you fall over and you get back up again, and everything you've just said, when you do fall back into it, when one falls back into it, and I can speak from my own experience, when you fall back into that unlovely place, and unlovely, I don't mean that in mild in any stretch of the imagination, but that for me is just both ends of the stick. When you're back in that unlovely place, is it fair to say the intensity or the depth of that unlovely place is not quite as much? So is it like each time you come back round or you fall back in, because have got, that might leave you on occasion, but the attitude of winning or learning, that it's that your default, even though you've fallen back, is like, okay, right. And it sounds like you recognised where you were and knew something had to change. And so it's almost like as you come back round to it, it's not as intense or as deep as it was before, which in itself, even though you've fallen back, is growth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly is now. It certainly is now. Now that I've kind of come through the other side of it, good, after treatment and counselling and all the other things that I do to manage things, it certainly is that way now, because good, I've got a hold on it. You know,
well, yeah. I was going to say, that sounds like that routine that you went back to with the fitness, the running, the weights, the things that work for you, whether it's getting up early and you finding your solace place and it worked, and then it doesn't. Is it fair to say that it needs to be a consistent choice as well as having outside support help? If we don't keep choosing it, then we are going to fall back.
100%. And that choice, whatever that looks like, is different for everyone. So I'm at a stage now. I'm still doing all the things I used to, running, lifting weights, but I've also started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a martial art, which is wrestling and submissions, which is great as well. So 5-6 days a week, I'm very active. I'm doing something. That's my choice. That's how I choose to manage these things. That's got to be different, or it will be different for everybody.
Well, of course it will, and that's where self-reflection and maybe outside help with counselling or coaches, mentors, whatever it is, a dear friend as an example, that's where your own reflection, where for me it might be a walk in nature, meditate, a sound, singing, whatever it might be. For you it would be jiu-jitsu and going for a 30-mile run, but a long run.
Not
I
anymore.
love running. I'm sprinting. Not anymore, but it's and I'm active, but I might swim or cycle, whereas you might run. But that's where the internal reflection is necessary to work out, do what lights you up. What is it that you want to get excited about, that your rituals and your routine, again, saved your life and has now brought you to a place where you are a wonderful husband and a wonderful dad to your son and your daughter. And I'm sure you are a joy to be around. We haven't known each other very long, but I'm sure you are a joy to be around because of your and let's just say colourful, because I think that's a beautiful thing. Your colourful life and your attitude, that you've trained yourself to have this beautifully resilient mindset, to look at things and reframe them in a way that is helpful, and to manage your emotions that you taught yourself through your experience and the experience that you had around other people. And that journey, however tumultuous that might be, would you have changed any of it to get you where you are today?
No. I was talking about this with one of my business partners the other day. No, because I wouldn't be who I am now. You change one thing and it can send you off on a completely different trajectory. Maybe I never met my girlfriend who became my wife, who I had 2 beautiful children with. So
yeah,
it's it's if you are in that position where you like your life, and I don't like my life, I love my life and I love the people in it, you have to accept that you have to love everything about it, and that includes all the failures and all the wrong decisions or poor decisions you make. It's about everything. It's like where people go, I want to retire, I want to be in a utopia. Well, utopia means fucking nowhere. That's what utopia is translated to. That's not. It's not. Yeah, that means nowhere. It doesn't mean
not.
anything. It's not what we want, I don't think. You know, I do believe that's why when we started the session about feeling your emotions and learning to have a healthy relationship and process them properly.
Yeah.
I don't think things like happiness would feel as good if times weren't also shit as well. I honestly don't feel that.
Well, and also, if we're going to be brutally honest, life is colourful. Life is both ends of the stick. You get polar opposites from one minute to the next. It can be completely different. I remember a brilliant man I studied a lot through my self-development journey was Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I heard him say once, you get two choices, or you get one choice out of these two options. You can have everything you've ever wanted in your life, including people, all the material stuff, everything you've ever wanted in life on one side of the scales, or the ability to know how to choose peace regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I choose peace.
I've never, in all my years, have I asked that question, has anybody ever given me the former? They might joke, but actually they go, no, you're right. No, I couldn't. Because even if you have everything you've ever wanted in that utopia place, and a curveball comes out from the side and swipes you over and you fall apart at the seams, what good is all the things you've ever wanted? Nothing. It's jack shit. Yeah. I'd much rather, I believe, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, I think being able to manage my emotions has been my single greatest learning in my life. Because life does happen and I can surround myself with the most amazing people. But if one of them or I am sideswiped and I don't know how to deal with myself and I can't regulate myself, then I'm no use to anyone. And that's my greatest wish for anybody, is to learn how to regulate their own internal environment. And it sounds like majority or the large part of that you have been self-taught. Yes, you've had professional help and you've had the love of beautiful friends and family around you, but nobody can do it for you.
Yeah, no, I do. I massively agree, and just so I'm when I say this, I do mean it in full honesty, and I say integrity shout because I'm saying it to myself as well as to people to know that I'm being truthful. I'm still learning. You know, I still things happen. I still struggle to deal with them emotionally, and that's, you know, that's because I'm doing new things. You know, running my own business now, it has new challenges, it has new emotional challenges, etc. So I think the danger for me is if I switch off to it and I go, right, that's it. I know everything about emotional regulation now, and any situation turns up, I can deal with it. If I start saying that to myself, that's a problem, because I know I'm kidding myself. I'm being delusional. Yeah. But I'm much better at it than I used to be. Yeah. And I will continue to grow.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because your greatest learning is if you're not winning, you're learning, right? Your learning in life isn't I've won and I've learnt, is it? It's you're winning and you're learning. And if that's an attitude, and an attitude being the way we see our lives and the world around us, if the attitude is I'm winning or I'm learning, whatever situation you find yourself in till the moment you pass over, because I believe there is nowhere to get to and we're never done. It's a constant choice. And that's why it's important to be kind to ourselves and also have fun and times for rest and relax, for sure. But now you touched on it. You have your own business now, findyourmindset.co.uk, with two lovely guys that have been in your life a long time and supported you. And you help other people now. Yeah. Do exactly. And what greater teacher would we want than you?
That's very kind. No, thank you very much for saying that. That's the idea. That's the idea behind it. We're not here to teach ideologies. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to help you find your way and support you in that. Now, obviously, there are tools. There are things that we can help you or give you to try. And if that doesn't work, we'll find something else.
Wow.
But that's ultimately what it's about. We're helping people find their mindset. I found mine. I want others to help. I want to help others find their way as well,
I love
and
that.
support them on their route and their journey.
Wow. And can you imagine, and this is what keeps me going, because like you, I have a great mission and vision in this world with my work, and sometimes I can get tired and with what's going on, as we understand it's a shit show our life is at the moment outside of us, and what's going on, the only thing I can control is me. And when I do get tired sometimes, and life does feel a bit heavy, I just take a breath, I pause, I breathe, I feel my beating heart, I feel grateful, and I just remind myself that if everybody could just look after their own corner of the world, which they are the centre of, our lives would be very different. So I have to be, and I choose to be, the example first. And I want to thank you for being the example. I joke and say the proof is in the pudding, and I think you're a pudding as well as I'm a pudding. Thank you for being a pudding and proving that this work works when you work it. I'm in awe. And I would love to have many more conversations with you, James, around this, because I think there is so much more to your experience that could be of real value to other people.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, bless you. Have you got any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Have I got any final thoughts before we wrap up? I think anyone that is listening to this, I want to say thank you for listening to it. And I would say try this. Okay, so I call it daily mind setting. All right, and it's 4 bearings. All right, like bearings like on a compass. Sorry. So understand, adapt, evolve, overcome. All right. I just want you to concentrate on the understand bearing tomorrow morning, or whenever you listen to this. Wake up tomorrow morning and take a few minutes to appreciate what you're grateful for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Could be having a good night's sleep. Could be the fact that you roll over and your wife's comfortable. Maybe she's had a good... My wife doesn't because I snore. But it could be the fact that your children are tucked up nice and warm in bed. It could be you've got hot water. Whatever it is, take the moment to just be grateful for something and appreciate it, because whatever happens the rest of that day, I believe that you've already are going to look at that with some perspective, because we are wired to solve problems, aren't we? That's what humans do. It's like, right, where's the next problem to solve? Where am I going to have to deal with stuff today? Go into that with perspective. Go into that remembering that there is good in your life. There are things that don't need solving, and give them as much weight as you do the problems. Because I always say, like, to some of my clients, like, let's say we're doing an investigation, for example. How many of you done a what went well investigation? And no one puts their hands up.
It's not is it?
Yeah. How many people have done a what went shit investigation? Everybody puts their hand up.
Yes.
Why do we do that? Why we shouldn't do that. We should also acknowledge, don't be delusional, but acknowledge the things that are good in your life. So that's my final thought, I would say.
Oh, and a really powerful one. And I don't think as a human race we appreciate the power of gratitude, because when we are grateful and feel truly grateful as well, it can shift most and a lot of things in our life. James, thank you.
Thank you.
For giving us your time and sharing your beautifully colourful life with us, and some many great insights and learnings. So God bless you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it again. The invitation is to take a few moments to reflect on what's resonated with you here today. Let us know what you find. Share this episode with those you love to practice your vulnerability and enable deeper connection with self, others, and the world around you. May you feel blessed and loved as you live your days with purpose and presence. Thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing you. I love you.